Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Alicia Leinberger of Viroqua is the Democratic candidate in the 96th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Alicia, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much.
I want to ask you about an issue that you seem to highlight on your campaign website. Mm-hmm. You say gun laws have been run over by lobbyists working for gun manufacturers who don't seem to care who gets those guns. Is that a top issue for you?
No, it's not a top issue.
Okay.
But it is a major concern. I do have teenage daughters, yes, and they go to high school.
But
and
you said at age 12 you were a sharpshooter.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
So.
Yeah, I grew up. My dad is an avid duck hunter, and he taught riflery for many years at a camp that we attended in the summer. And so when I was young, I was shooting .22s and shotguns, and I really enjoyed it.
What changes do we need in gun laws? Because you were just endorsed by Moms Demand Action.
That's right.
For...
Oh, gosh. You know, when it really comes down to the nitty-gritty, I look to law enforcement, I look to mental health people, and I look to teachers to tell us what do we need in schools. And I guess, you know, in streets as well, because we are seeing a lot in... I suppose there's a lot of focus on schools, but it's happening in streets. My daughters and I, and actually a bunch of high schoolers, traveled to D.C. on March 24th for the March for Our Lives, and we learned a lot there, and obviously we were very energized by that, by those kids really bringing this issue to the forefront. And just some very basic, reinstate the 48-hour waiting period. My dad says to me, we need background checks at gun shows. This is insane that you can buy a gun and walk out and sell it to somebody else. Or in some of the other things that I've noticed, that the Wisconsin Police Chiefs Association really highlights more funding for mental health and crisis prevention in communities, as well as red flag laws, which allows law enforcement to communicate with the county or health services or schools and really point out kids that are in trouble or adults that are in trouble, and go and make sure that they can get the arms away from them, just to make sure that they're safe and that others are safe around them. So those types of, I think, very common sense laws that I don't understand why it's so difficult to get passed when the majority of Americans feel very strongly about it.
So that's an issue in your campaign, but what do you consider the top issue in your campaign this time around?
Yeah, the top issue is healthcare for me.
Healthcare.
Yep. And for all of us, really. I have heard, wow, countless stories about people whose lives have been turned upside down and backwards with healthcare problems within their family.
Let's talk about rural healthcare.
Yeah.
In the rural areas, you have older residents, you have young people leaving, you have household incomes that are lower than the statewide average, more and more health care provided by Medicare and Medicaid. How would you ensure that health care is still accessible in the rural areas?
Well, for one thing, there's a lot of folks in rural areas, lower income, that rely on, as you're saying, Medicare and Medicaid.
More and more.
The first thing that we do, which is, again, very common sense, and it's difficult to understand why it hasn't been done, but get our federal tax dollars back into our state and expand Badger Care. It'll save us money, and we'll cover, many, many more people, and especially in rural areas where you have a lot of farmers and small business people, entrepreneurs, and elder folks. We need that kind of social safety net just as much as they do in urban areas, and it's something that we should get done immediately. I guess it's the basis. I would like to see us move towards looking at other options, such as a Badger Care for All public option or a single payer system. I'm interested in getting the profit-driven part of our healthcare system out of it, because I think that that's costing us a lot of money and it's reducing our quality of care. So I'd like to see us seriously consider options once we get the expanded Badger care.
Does state government have a role in recruiting and retaining physicians, nurses, and other
Yes.
healthcare professionals?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, and I think that used to be more common, where you would have doctors, and my sister just graduated as a, it's a counselor person, and if she works in a rural area for a certain amount of time, she gets some of her loan forgiven over time. So I'd like to see a lot more of that, and more. Someone was just telling me about a place in, there was a hospital. Well, one of the folks that's endorsed me is a doctor in Lafarge, and before she came to Lafarge, she was looking around at other hospitals, and there's a clinic that's I can't remember where it is, but it's in the middle of Wisconsin, and they've been looking for 2 years, and they have a very high pay, and they have a good sort of situation that the person can come into, but it's very difficult to get someone to live there and commit to that kind of.
The impasse in the Capitol over how to pay for our highways and bridges.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that 2 years ago. We're still talking about it.
That's crazy making.
But how would you solve it? Gas tax, registration fee, tolling?
Well, gas tax.
Gas
I mean,
tax?
it makes perfect sense.
How big of a bump?
I haven't studied it because I'm still a candidate. Obviously, I would study it when I get the job. But everyone's saying 5 cents will do for now, right? So that seems to me, since so many people have agreed, our county, so many counties have passed that as a resolution that they want that to happen. The Towns Association has passed it. It seems like a no-brainer. Let's start there. The thing that really bothers me about the transportation budget at this point is how much borrowing we're doing. And I'm opposed to borrowing for infrastructure when you don't need to, when there's another solution. And in this case, not only would I like to see that gas tax implemented, but I would like to make sure that a fair portion of that, a proportionate amount, goes to rural areas, and we're not left behind in that formula.
New subject. Local governments have been living with levy limits
Yes.
since 2006.
Oh, yes.
They say they're increasingly hurting their ability to provide local services. Is it time to loosen levy limits or get rid of them?
Oh my goodness, that's a big issue. I guess I can't say where I fall exactly on the question the way you've asked it. But what I can say is that what's happening now is not working. And I think a lot of the expense that's coming down on small communities, municipal communities where I live is actually expense that's coming. I hear the word unfunded mandate every single, I go to town, village, city, and county meetings. That's what I've been doing for the campaign. I hear that word. So the state is coming and saying, you have to do this, and you have to figure out how to pay it. And that you can't raise your property taxes, you can't raise the levy. And so what they're doing, a lot of communities, is they're sneaking it into utility costs. And they're raising it that way. Or referendums for schools, and they're raising it that way. And I think it's a really disingenuous, if I can get that word out, and honestly cowardly way of passing the buck onto those local officials that are working really hard as volunteers to keep our everyday lives running, and it looks like it's their fault. And I'm not exactly sure how to solve that problem. But it's my number 3 priority. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The current state budget does increase K-12 aid to public schools.
Yeah.
Does it increase it enough, or would you
No.
in the next budget cycle want another substantial
Yes.
increase?
Yes.
How would you pay for that? First of all, why do we need another big increase?
Yes.
How would you pay for it?
Well, I am currently looking at a whole lot of waste going on in this administration, both in debt service that's being paid, accumulating debt service that we're paying off to banks that I don't think is necessary. And secondly, I'm seeing, we're going to have to talk about Foxconn, so let's just look at that.
Let's go there.
And let's look at Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and other little points in different parts of the budget where if you look at all these little favors that are going on and we add those up, that's waste. That's government waste. And that should be going in to be invested in our kids and our schools, especially in rural communities, to make sure that they have the same opportunities as other kids. So that would be one way. In addition, you know, when Tommy Thompson was in office and he was a Republican governor, he committed to 2/3 of the funding out of shared revenue. And I'd like to get back to that level.
Get back to that.
Yes. So it's something that I'm a small business person, and I know that whatever you value, you invest in, right? And so what does it tell our kids and our teachers if we keep, this is what's been going on for the past 8 years, taking, and then right before the election, ooh, we'll sprinkle some crumbs around. You know, how do they feel?
So you're not a fan of that $100 per child tax check that'll be going out in September or going out now? You would not have voted for it?
I would not have. Well, no, I would not have voted for it. I actually don't know. I mean, that people are having such a hard time, but that $100 really doesn't make a whole lot of a difference.
Okay.
So it's a little bit insulting to be throwing crumbs like that. Yeah, I don't know how I would have voted on that, but I wish it wouldn't come up in the first place because we don't need to have that kind of crumb sprinkling, you know.
You mentioned Foxconn.
Yeah.
You would not have voted for that tax incentive package?
No.
You don't think the 96 district businesses will get any of that?
No.
So,
No.
but
in fact, it takes away from what. I mean, it takes $142 million, I think it is, extra in roads just for Foxconn to expand, right? Drive down the roads where I live. You're like this, you know. And everybody knows it. It's putting wear and tear on our trucks, on our farm trucks, on our vehicles, and causing all sorts of undue stress on our county highway commissioners and our town patrolmen. I go to these meetings, and these town officers are trying to figure out, with the smallest amount of money, how can they patch and just to keep it together. And meanwhile, you see them writing a $142 million check for the roads to Foxconn. Okay, so that's just one example. And we could go on and on. Actually, I saw a very interesting presentation by Gordon Hintz and Jennifer Schilling. And Gordon did a great job of breaking it down and showing exactly how much of our state tax dollars are going to this Chinese company that has absolutely no commitment or investment in Wisconsin.
Okay. Let's go back to K-12 public schools. The choice program, the voucher program, has been growing, started in Milwaukee, Racine, now statewide. What's your position on the choice program?
Get rid of it.
Get rid of it entirely?
Yep.
Okay, just wipe it out.
Wipe it out. There's much better ways. If we want to have high quality public education, you know what the number one way to do that? Get parents into the schools, involved in the schools. That's absolutely number one. Both of my parents were, my own parents were public school teachers. So I grew up in a household of public school appreciation, and I really understand how hard those folks work. And if you want to have good public schools, you need them to be community centers and family basis, and we don't have that anymore. And so we need to get back to that. In addition, they talk about, oh, we need choice, we want to have this and that. Okay, well, charter schools are a great way to do that, and that requires communities coming in and envisioning how they want that school to exist and working with the school district to make that. And we've got a few of them in Viroqua, so I'm very familiar with it. My daughter is in a charter school in the high school, and it's wonderful.
Let's talk about prisons. A big issue in the next budget will be the Waupun and Green Bay prisons were built in the 1800s. We're closing the 2 juvenile prisons in northern Wisconsin. Do we need a new state prison? You thought about that?
You know, I will say it's not something that I've considered. In specific, I don't know what the numbers look like for that. Overall, I will say that our justice system is far too heavy on incarceration, and we need a lot more on the front end in prevention and treatment. And all of the law enforcement folks that I've spoken with where I live, the county sheriff and the judges, all have told me that. That's where I'm hearing it from, that we're not going to rest our way out of this, and that we actually are wasting a lot of money on incarcerating people that honestly are just have either a mental health problem or an addiction problem, that they need help.
Okay. What's your position on medical marijuana or legalizing recreational marijuana?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I have my pin here. So
Normal.
Yes, my normal pin.
National
However,
Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws.
yes, to reform.
Does that mean you support legalizing recreational?
I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there. You know, I think there's still some wrinkles to be. We can let some other states experiment for a while before we go there. But I am very much in favor of medicinal marijuana, and I'll tell you why. I've heard a number of stories from people, but I'll just tell you one. I was at the dairy breakfast in Vernon County last weekend or the weekend before, and I met a woman who said to me her husband had been on oxycodone for pain for 8 years and was about to go on dialysis and lose his kidney. And she got in touch with an organization in Colorado and got a kind of CBD oil that does have a certain amount of THC in it, I think. But he got on that, and he went off of the oxycodone and some other drugs as well, and feels much, much better. Mm-hmm. And I know other people who, for elderly parents, for seizures, and for different reasons, are having to obtain their medication illegally. And I just think that there's 29 states where it's legal. Really, Wisconsin? I think it's definitely not my top issue, but I think it's an issue that when I get in there and get the job, it's something that's pretty easy to talk about, because I haven't met anyone who disagrees.
Last question. The 96th Assembly is an open seat.
Yeah.
And you have a primary August 14th.
Yes, we do.
Do you want to talk about differences between you and your primary opponent?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, I think, so it's interesting. I have a primary opponent, and of course there's a general.
Sure, on November 6th.
Both of those gentlemen I've met them both. They're very nice people, and they're both 60-ish dairy farmers, right? In the 96, we've had a 60-ish, probably 70-ish now, dairy farmer for 7 terms. So I'm not sure that that's done us so well. We've lost, thousands of dairy farms, small dairy farms in that time period, and we've lost a lot of other things in the state under that. And I think that probably the biggest distinguishing factor is I have a much wider breadth and depth of experience to draw from. I have over 25 years of leadership and community service, starting with Peace Corps. I went into Peace Corps right out of college, and I was in Central America working with farmers, and came back and worked in fair trade and family farming issues here, and then international trade issues. And then I kind of out of that got into renewable energy, and for the past 16 years I've been working in renewable energy, and I own a solar energy company. And in addition to that, I've done a lot of volunteer work that have to do with social issues and economic issues around, oh my goodness, around frac sand mining and conservation and water protection and community radio stations and all sorts of different kinds of people. And in all of those, I have had an opportunity to really learn to work as an organizer. I have an organizer's mind. I think that's the biggest difference, is when I approach a table of folks sitting around and talking about issues and challenges, I immediately start thinking about who do we need to get here to get this solved? Who else, and what other questions do we need to ask? And I think that that's a very good place to start the job as a legislator.
Thank you. Alicia Leinberger of Roqua is a Democratic candidate in the 96th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Alicia, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much and for your work here.
Thank you very much.